Welcome back to your Pelvic Health Podcast. I am Susan Winograd, the founder of Pelvic Core Rehab, and I am thrilled to be your host. I'm really excited about today's episode, partially because our guest is really someone to be revered in the field. She is really set the stage and set the bar so high for other clinicians to learn from, to be mentored by, and just has done so much to help physical therapists give clients the best possible treatment. We have Susan Clinton on today. She's an award-winning physical therapist. She's the owner of LTI Physio. Susan's the founder and board member for the foundation of the Global Women's Health Initiative. She is on the top, a co-host with one of my other favorite people, Erica Mello, on one of the top 5 rated podcasts, Tough to Treat. I am definitely a Tough to Treat groupie. I have to say that for years. And she, and also the Genius Project. Susan, welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much time. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation that I know so many people will benefit from.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Susan. I can talk about you all day and not do you justice, but I would love if you could share a few words about yourself with our listeners.
Sure. I've been a physical therapist for about 43 years. I have been up in the pelvic health world since 1995. I got there through working in neuro rehab and acute care for the first part of my career, moved into orthopedics and then into pelvic health and in the 1990s, and was in private practice for a while. I sold that practice and I am now working virtually in the virtual space as an educator and mentor and doing distant consultations and hanging out with smart people like you.
Thank you, Susan. I can hang out with you all day. I've personally taken Susan's GI course. I've done a mentorship with her and Erica. And I don't even know if you remember this, Susan, but I actually recruited your help as a mentor on a very complex client that I have. And I continue to tap into your brilliance for as long as I can and that you will allow me to. Thank you so much for being here. You are, I feel like you are like the Angelina Jolie of the physical therapy world. Like I'm a little starstruck right now talking to you because that's just how amazing you are. I'd love to talk about all things GI today, Susan, because I feel like what I see, and I think what the general population in this podcast, we do have practitioners listening, but I think the vast majority of our listeners are just people looking for good, accurate information and direction and learning how to navigate the world of health and wellness in general. So I'd love to talk about all things GI and gut because it is so much more multifactorial, I think, than people realize. And I know just working with you and learning from you about the gut was so incredibly eye-opening to me. Can we start perhaps with you sharing with our clients what your metrics are? How do you approach helping someone with gut health and GI health as a globally? When you look at the big picture, what are you looking at as you approach gut and GI health? I know you look at
looking at the big picture, we want to look at, for me anyway, all the determinants of health are important here. And as we're learning, the gut microbiome is a reflector of what the central nervous system is doing, but it's also a driver of the central nervous system. So when I have people who are coming to me with pelvic health issues, such as pelvic pain, with sex, of course, but also urgency frequency, and stress urinary incontinence, I always look behind the scenes to see if we've got a GI dysfunction going on. because one of the biggest drivers to stress urinary incontinence and urgency frequency and pain is a GI system that's not regulated well. It creates increased inflammatory responses in the body, which can be reflected down into the pelvic region. Also, the other piece of this is somebody who is under a lot of stress, allostatic load of stress. They're working, they've got kids, they're running, from pillar to post, or they're not working and they're taking care of sandwich generation type issues. There's so many issues that people can get into. And as our central nervous system gets dysregulated, so does our pelvic health. Because if we're not in a protected space, for females, the brain is going to increase muscle tension, increase overprotective pain responses, increase inflammation, which is all reflected into the pelvic floor.
So what you're saying, and I don't want to tell you what you're saying, but I think to clarify, you cannot separate gut health and GI health from pelvic health. We have to look at both. And I think that is something that I really want to be clear about with our clients, because you can't have one without the other. And I think when clients come to us, sometimes they don't understand why we're asking all the questions we do and looking at all the systems, but you truly can't have pelvic health without gut and GI health, and vice versa.
Right, 100%. And I think a lot of people will come to us with pelvic health issues, but they'll say, I'm not constipated, or I don't have any bowel function problems, but they have joint pain and they're not sleeping well at night, and they're racing to the bathroom twice, 3 times, 4 times a night. They're having pain. They're having pain with insertion. They are having hip pain and, can't exercise the way they wanted to. There's a lot going on there. And we really need to look at the GI health as well, because it's a huge driver of not only inflammatory processes, but also, immunity.
Right.
And so people with bad gut health break down and get sick more often.
Right.
It's our big immune system as well.
Right.
So we really want to get kind of behind that and have that system along with the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system. I mean, every one of your clients, I'm sure, has been introduced to breathing and breathing techniques and breathing exercises, which I can't emphasize enough as the foundation for everything that we do. But there's a reason for that, because of the nervous system regulation that will help regulate the GI system as well as the pelvic health system.
Right. I'm so happy you said that.
So most people don't realize they're...
Go ahead.
Yeah, most people don't realize they're constipated. I have a bowel movement every day, I'm fine. And it's like, you may not be having a complete bowel movement. And when we keep a load inside of our belly, that increases pressure down onto our pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor over time is either going to keep tightening up and resist that pressure, or it's going to let go and just say, we're not holding it anymore.
Right.
And so then we get into other issues, obviously, like, now we're peeing when we're coughing and laughing and sneezing. The other part of it, though, is the biggest part that we see with people is going to be more of the irritable bowel type stuff.
Yeah.
And irritable bowel is something that a lot of people live with and don't realize that's a problem. They've normalized it. But basically what that means is visceral pain, visceral discomfort, belly pain, belly discomfort. And where I start the very finds that I see with people is with bloating and distension.
That's one
they
of
may
the
not
most
realize that they're
that's one of the most profound things that I learned from you, Susan, when I took your course, is about bloating and distension. And I'd love for you to expand on this. And that just like our nervous systems can become sensitized, so can our digestive systems and the lumen of our intestines. And that was like a mind-blowing moment for me when I learned that for you, because it gave me such good language to help my clients understand it. Because how many people do we have walking around saying, I'm so bloated, I'm so distended, and they think that it only has something to do with a food intolerance or only something to do with constipation, but it is truly so much more than that. Can we sort of
Right.
dive into that a little bit about IBS and really truly what it is and your approach to helping people overcome it and help them heal it, and what is the difference between bloating and distension? Because there is a difference. I know, because I learned it from you. Because I think those are terms that people use interchangeably, and I think those are terms that people use broadly and globally every time they have like a bellyache, but it's really your body giving you information. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Sure, 100%. So the definition, irritable bowel syndrome, is basically a GI system that is either constipated or diarrheal or both, which is what we usually see, is that it switches back and forth from being where it's really hard to go to the bathroom, or I'm going 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. The thing that makes it irritable bowel is the discomfort that goes with it. So people can be constipated, or they can be, have diarrhea, or fast moving system, but not have any discomfort. But with irritable bowel syndrome, definitely there's hypersensitivity of the belly. So, of the GI system. And if you think about the GI system being as, just all these tubes that are all wiggling around and all, put together and held together, it's the tube that distends. There's an increase, in the tube when we eat or when we drink water or we have gas. And so with people with irritable bowel syndrome, it's an abnormal response to a normal stretching of the tube. So the tube stretches on everybody. Everybody gets gas. It's normal. Everybody can have a faster moving system or a slower moving system, depending upon what's going on in their life. That's a normal response that we just don't want to have a chronic response. When we have an abnormal response to normal stretch, that's when we have discomfort. So it's not like people are getting an abnormal amount of gas. It's not like people are getting an abnormal amount of stuff going through. It's just to them, it feels like it's really huge. Right. So the description of bloating is that it's like, I feel like I've got this big, heavy thing in my belly, and it really is uncomfortable. Some people, it's quite painful. Other people, it's more just like, just such discomfort. And so that's the definition of bloating. Distension is that feeling of bloating with an actual change of the girth of their waist.
Right.
So the belly, in other words, blows out. Right. And then people are like, I feel like I'm pregnant. I feel like I, have this big belly. It comes on in the afternoon and evening more often than not. On really bad days, it starts in the morning. Mm-hmm. Generally starts after we eat because of that abnormal response to a normal stretch. We also have a difference in how our body responds. So a normal person who has gas, this is what their body does. The belly muscles actually slightly tighten up. And they do that on purpose to move the gas through. And the diaphragm is very free to move. So the belly tightens up and the diaphragm really, you can breathe, and we can move that gas through and make it, that's the normal response. For people who have this abnormal response, this bloating and bloating distension type of response, their body does the opposite. So when they have pain, the brain tells the belly to move away from the pain. So instead of tightening up slightly, I'm not talking about gripping and like pulling your belly muscles in, but when the brain, tells the belly muscles, like, just move away, that hurts. We don't want to hurt, move away. So the belly muscles actually relax. And in order for us to stay upright and to keep moving, if our belly muscles aren't helping us maintain trunk stability, if they're softening and relaxing and letting go, then our diaphragm is going to, in response, tighten up and not be a good breathing muscle and be much more of a postural control muscle. In other words, it has to pick up where the belly's leaving off.
Right.
And so we end up, and that makes the swelling of the belly even worse because now we don't have good movement and the gas is being trapped and it's doing is blowing the belly out.
Right.
And so it's very, very uncomfortable.
Susan, one of the things that I love about you the most is your ability to explain things in a way that everybody can understand. The way you just articulated that is brilliant, and it's another way for people to understand why breathing mechanics are so important. I always tell people that when you breathe, it's like giving your digestive system a massage to help everything move through the system. So I think that's brilliant. How would you tell people, how do you approach and help people overcome that hypersensitivity?
Yeah, so there's several ways to work with this whole syndrome, and obviously, which thread do you want to pull? Because it's multifactorial, as you said earlier. It is not a single treatment. It is not a single intervention. It's not a single problem. So breathing is one. Quiet breathing, nice breathing, that decreases sensitivity in our system. The movement is really super important, but not the kind of movement that people think. It's not appropriate to go run a 5-mile run if you're in this situation. This is where you need to do more of that really luscious, nourishing type of movement. That could be anything from a quiet walk in the park with music on or just silence, not listening to the news, please, no news. And, or just doing like a simple, lovely stretching program at home. Or if you're into it, doing something like yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or any of those types of things that are just really nice and meditative movements can be very helpful. Never underestimate the things that we can grab a hold of first as really easy things to do.
Yeah. And I remember when we were talking a long time ago, we talked about the beauty and the importance of rotational movements.
Yeah.
Especially for digestive health. So I have always incorporated that. And I think I listen when you talk, Susan. So I will never forget that. We talked about a homuncular refresh, right? And that we need to incorporate rotational movements or it would be very beneficial for GI health. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people.
Right. So think about it if you're out there and you have belly pain and think about how you move. You're not getting the nice movement. Part of it is because your diaphragm is being held very stiff. And so that limits your ability to move with rotation from the top to the bottom, from the upper back to the lower back and through the feet. And when we actually add rotation in, the diaphragm is getting signals that it needs to let go. And it needs to change and move. What's the simplest form of getting rotation in? Walking with your arms swinging. You don't even have to do anything else. Just do that. Yeah. But there's all kinds of wonderful exercises. All the exercises in the world out there that work for balance bring rotation in because that's the first thing that's lost.
Yeah.
Is when people stiffen up. And they stiffen up in response to things rather than be a willow tree. Yeah. So don't be an oak, be a willow tree when this is coming on.
I saw one of my favorite sweet mamas postpartum yesterday, and she actually came to me and she said, Susan, she had a C-section and she knew she couldn't have a vaginal delivery. So she knew she couldn't go into labor. She was waiting for her C-section date. And she said, Susan, I need help. I feel like for the last 3 months of my pregnancy, I was just kind of gripping and stiffening, just willing everything to stay in place and not happen. And she was very stuck in this, anterior, posterior plane. And as soon as we started like rotating her and showing her that she can trust her body again, she literally let out this like sigh of relief, like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And that's because it was, I'm sure,, into that part of her nervous system that was allowing her to rest and digest and repair, but also just allowing her to have variability in her movements. It was a lot of work for her to eliminate that rotation that she thought was so protective.
Right. So this is oftentimes when you have this issue We will also be working into your thorax, helping you get mobility there, teaching you exercises for mobility there, because all of that, all the nerves that go to your belly come out of that part of your back, the upper back. So that's important for getting nerves moving and gliding and sliding, helps decrease sensitivity overall. And that's another thing that's added into like the movement part of the program. So the next pieces that need to be addressed are things like sleep, and not the length of sleep you're getting, but the amount of deep sleep and REM sleep, which is considered the more quality sleep. There's plenty of wearables out there on the market that will measure this at nighttime for you. It's good to kind of begin to look at that and look at ways that you can bring and soothe your system down at night. My favorite thing before we even work on a nighttime routine is work on a morning routine.
I love
When
that.
you're up in the morning, first thing in the morning, get outside and get some sunlight in your eyes. If you can't get outside, get in front of a window, but it's best without contacts on, glasses, and normal sunlight. The reason is the sun is the best form of blue light we have, which will decrease the melatonin, increase cortisol so that you can wake up and get going. Vice versa, just at least see the sun going down or the change of the sky in the evening. People always say, I live in northern Michigan right now, and our sun doesn't go down till 10 o'clock at night.
Oh my goodness.
So, and it's like, because it's the summertime.
Right. I would do really well there because I'm so affected by natural light. You have to, I don't even.
Then you wouldn't like the winter because
I know, right. Right. I would have to be a snowbird there. I actually, Susan, I don't even have shades in my house. Everyone thinks I'm bananas because you could see into my house at every angle, but I just want the natural sunlight flowing in from all angles. I think that is amazing advice. I think there was a study done about being outside and broadening your field of vision and how that helps your nervous system relax. Am I making that up, Susan?
You're not making it up. What you're doing is, but it's actually kind of a natural booster rather than an artificial booster like caffeine, which can, by the way, caffeine can drive hypersensitivity of your nervous system.
Yes.
So maybe switch over to something like a little bit easier type of caffeine. If you've got to be on the caffeine train, look for perhaps a green tea or something a little bit lighter. But the sunlight's a better caffeine than anything. You can get outside, even on a rainy day. Go stand on your porch. It's still sunlight. It's still blue waves that are coming in. And then in the evening, just notice the sky and the difference in the color. And that begins to decrease the cortisol and raise the melatonin up for nighttime. So simple things like this can help in all of the stuff that's going on with people. And then there's there is a matter of food. And one of the things that I
want to get to food, Susan. I want to get to food, but because I want to hear all your pearls of wisdom, but can we go back to sleep for a second? I know that I know we talked briefly about devices, but how do we talked in our course a little bit about heart rate variability. How do you teach your clients to sort of track that? What are they looking for when they're trying to establish a better sleeping routine and sort of ascertain if they're getting that good REM sleep?
Yeah, so all of a good number of the variables, and I'm not a master of all of them. I only work with a couple of them. But the wearables that are out there will track your sleep, will give you a sleep graph, will show you how much is deep sleep, how much is light sleep, how much you're awake, how much you're in REM sleep, and what you want. And so sleep comes in cycles. Like, let's say you get 6 cycles of sleep a night. The first cycle is going to be where you're going to get the longest length of deep sleep. That's what it should look like. And then some REM sleep, and then maybe some light sleep. And then you'll go back to the next cycle, which will have a shorter amount of deep sleep and possibly a longer amount of REM sleep. And then the light sleep, and hopefully not a wake up in there. And that keeps going until the deep sleep is like almost non-existent in the final cycle. And the REM sleep is the biggest one, which is why we always feel like we're waking up out of a dream, because we're waking up out of REM sleep. And so the devices will track that, and you can look at that and see how long is my deep sleep, how long is my REM sleep, and put the two together. That's your quality sleep. And how the brain feasts on REM and deep sleep is going to be different. Oftentimes people will say, oh, I've been up for 2 nights in a row, I'm going to sleep so good tonight. And they don't sleep very well, and they're up all night with dreams. It's the brain has decided that it's going to feast on REM sleep first.
Right.
And then maybe 2 nights later, it'll finally drop back into a a deep sleep. So it's not, sleeping isn't cumulative, and you can't make it up.
Right.
If you lose it, you lose it. You got to just regulate your system back again and get it back on track. So that's one way. Most of the devices now will also give you a HRV reading, a basic average HRV reading from the whole night.
Right. So HRV is heart rate variability, just for people that don't know.
Yeah, for people who don't know, it's not the number of beats your heart makes, it's the space in between the heartbeats. So it should be, as we breathe in, we have less space between our heartbeats. And as we breathe out, we have more space between our heartbeats. That's why all the breathing exercises you're learning from your pelvic health practitioner emphasize exhale, because it brings a little bit more variability in to the heart rate. And the more variability we have, like movement, like what you said, Susan, about movement, variability of movement, we want to have variability of all of these symptoms. That's what builds resilience for us.
Right.
So you can track that on the devices, or you can go to a device that just looks specifically at heart rate variability, and you can track that. There's many of them out there. If you want me to send you a list of my favorites, I'm happy to do that.
I would love for you to send it to me. I think I may have a list that when we talked, I think you gave me a few, and I'll put them in the show notes, but I'm sure by now you've accumulated more of them. So I will take I will never turn down a resource from you, Susan. That's the bottom line. So
there's really good wearables out there. The only ones I'm familiar with is the Garmin and the Oura Ring and the Core Sense for heart rate variability. So
I have a sleep number bed, and it tracks your sleep. It can't track it to the same degree that a wearable does, right? Because I
don't know how it's pulling that in. I just know that we're getting more savvy every year about what these wearables can do. And I'm assuming that everybody does understand that we're all moving towards chips.
Yeah.
To where we can just have a chip in our arm and we can look at our own data, and our physicians will be able to see our data, and everybody will be able to see our data, and it'll be, population health, everything. So
yeah, that's great. I have a question, and I don't want to digress too much, because I think this conversation is so critically important, and I know a conversation all my clients will be so interested in. But are you concerned at all when you have a client wear a Garmin or an Oura Ring that there is going to create some kind of hypervigilance about the quality of their sleep, and that may to some degree be counterproductive? I experience that sometimes with bowel and bladder diaries, and I think there are certain people who I won't give a bowel and bladder diary to, because I know that their personality type will develop a hypervigilance toward it. Is that something that you take into consideration with heart rate variability devices?
Absolutely. But I still think we need to know where we are. So one of the things that I like to do with people that, and my clients tell me up front that I really don't want to have to do this. And it's like, we're just going to get some data points. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to correlate it to how you feel.
Yeah. So you're setting the stage for what the purpose is. And this is not like a blood pressure cuff that you need to be looking at every 5 minutes.
Right. 100%. And so we get data points, and I help them correlate that to what they feel. Like when you wake up in the morning and you feel crummy, what does that look like? And you can trust that I didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Or when they're, having the, bloating, distension, and hypersensitivity in the morning versus the usual time in the afternoon, what did that look like? So that they know what they need to adjust.
Yeah.
And what they can do. So, it's one of those things, you don't have to look at it every day, but you can check in on it once every 2 weeks. Once, if you're on a good program and you're staying on a good program, check in once a month and see what your numbers are.
I really like that.
How they've changed.
I really, really like that. And I think that knowledge is power, and we can't change what we don't know. So if we just put it in simple terms like that, we're using this as information so we can implement it into action if we need to, but certainly not something that I like it that you said they don't need to look at it every day because,
No.
I don't want people waking up at 2:00 in the morning to see what their quality of sleep is like.
But they're not getting quality sleep. But I do want them to, if they're not sleeping well, we do need to see on the Garmin when it shows the sleep graph, it's like, do you have an orange wall? Because they're awake half the night.
Right. Do you try to, this is the last question about sleep and then we'll move on. Although I think I could spend a whole episode on sleeping with you. Do you help guide people? Let's say someone's a night owl and they don't go to sleep till 2 a.m. and they wake up at 11 o'clock in the morning, or someone that can't stay awake past 7 p.m. I'm close to that. I'm usually in bed by 9, but, and then they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Do you feel that the time, the hours that you are sleeping, and when I say it's time, I mean from like 10 o'clock to 6 a.m., is important, or is it just the quality of sleep that you're getting?
So the quality of sleep is what's important.
Okay.
Always. But it varies from person to person. So if it's an older person who wants to go to bed at 8 o'clock and wants to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're very productive and very happy and their health markers are all good, who cares?
Right.
If it's somebody who wants to go to, who wants to sleep, go to bed later and sleep later, that's fine too. The only thing that, I want them to be sure that they've checked their quality of sleep, because oftentimes what I've noticed is that people who are driven to stay up to 2 a.m. are also very driven to be either on their computer or their TV or their phone.
Yeah.
And can we switch? So my thing is that I don't mind that you stay up that late. I do mind if you're doing cortisol producing activities, because that's not going to help your sleep.
That makes a ton of sense.
So if they're reading and they just like to read and they've got a nice light on and that just makes them happy, and their sleep is good, I'm fine with that. But if they're burning the midnight oil and they're doing that consistently, we know that system is under load.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be healthy for them in the long run.
Right. And it comes back to asking good questions, right? Well, if you're going to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, what are you doing up until that time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, it's multi-factorial. It could be that they are doing the things that they, need to do, but they're not doing it in a way that's driving their system up.
Yeah.
That's regulating their nervous system. Yeah. For the people who have young children at home or teenagers, because teenagers are the same problem, they're just older, just more of a mind game than it is a physical game. Optimize your sleep as best as you can between 10 and 2. That's what I do with the postpartum ladies. It's like, I get that you can't sleep. I get it. And you don't need to explain it to me. I understand. Can you time your feeding as much as possible so that you can get into bed sometime between 10 and 11 so that you can at least grab 2 hours during that time, knowing that first sleep cycle is going to be where we can capture and feed on that deepest sleep.
Right.
And at least they will get that piece, and then they will just kind of go up and down. And this is why babies are for the young, because they're more resilient.
Yes, absolutely.
They can recover faster than somebody in their 50s trying to do this.
Yeah. So I don't have babies at home anymore, Susan, but I have a 17-year-old. And so now instead of waking up in the middle of the night, I'm staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning waiting for him to come home. So I think it never ends. I'm waiting for that worry and that sleep, undisturbed sleep, not worrying about your children. But now I have grandchildren I worry about. So we do the best we can. And I have heard you say that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is that time.
And the reason for that is, and that doesn't matter where you are on the globe. But the reason for that is that's the time when we're going to get our best dose of human growth hormone, which is the repair hormone for our bodies to do the work that they need to do at nighttime.
I love that. Thank you.
that's deep sleep.
Yeah.
So this is why when you travel across time zones, things get messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about nutrition. So,
Mhm.
it's so interesting, Susan, because we hired an amazing nutritionist in my practice just so we could add that piece into it. And I felt like I was like living under a rock for a little bit because Megan, our nutritionist, started talking to me about disordered eating and things like that. And I was saying, oh, no, that's not our demographic. We have a lot of clients with constipation, with gut issues, with IBS. And I literally stopped talking and I realized, oh my goodness, so many of our clients develop disordered eating because they become afraid of food or they
Right.
don't want to eat because they don't want to poop or, and how can we use nutrition to heal? How can we use food as medicine? I know you have so much to say on that, and I would love to hear it.
Okay, so first things first, if we're going to go from regulating the nervous system and disordered, just being afraid of food or worrying about your food or what can I eat when I can't eat, I'm going to tell you this right now. How you eat is as important as what you eat. So if you're going to have a beautiful, nutritious smoothie and you're going to slurp it down in 2 minutes while you're driving in traffic across town, you might as well not even drink the smoothie. It's not going to do you any good. You need to kind of think about, even if you only have 5 minutes to eat, make that 5 minutes count for the best 5 minutes of your day at that moment. Chew your food slowly, enjoy everything that you're eating. Make it the most mindful practice you can. If you've got more time, great. If that's all you have is 5 minutes, then make that 5 minutes count. Truly, make that 5 minutes count. And we can find those times more often than not. I have to run here. I have to pick up this person here. I have to do this here. But oftentimes, it's a lot of time spent sitting in the car
Yeah. Yeah.
with the end just sitting there, like
Yeah.
waiting for the class to let out. Put on some music, take your time, eat your snack, but eat it like it's the most wonderful thing given to you on a golden platter by the head of the chef service for the president.
You
Like, I mean, just like the best, most special thing each time it comes to you. And that's going to soothe your system so much so that you're not going to have this wild, like racing, run to the bathroom response, or you're not going to have the belly pain as much. And, there's ways to kind of rewire your thoughts too. If you're afraid or you think it's going to hurt, think about something before you eat that's so wonderful, like a time in your life where it was just such a celebration to be with people and to enjoy your food, and make that time about this. So that's the first thing, is chew your food, but also in such a loving way and such a like, this is you caring for your body. This is you giving nutrition to yourself.
I think that's a
So
really novel idea that people don't think about like that. They don't
Mhm.
think about food like that. I think we all live in a fast-paced culture and we're all grab and go and we're all fast food. And I am sitting silently because I want everybody to heed every word that you're saying because it's so important. Actually, the first time I heard that from you, it inspired me. We had a challenge on my private Facebook group. It was a mindful eating challenge. One day we focused on the smell as we were eating, and one day we focused on the texture in our mouths, and one day we put our forks down between every bite. And I think that it like appreciating and really making our meals an experience is a really novel idea for people.
Mm-hmm. 100%, because we're just used to doing it quickly and fast and on the go. And, our society is built around that. So we tend to function around what the society is built around, which is the external pressures to do it versus the internal pressures, which need to be the opposite.
Yeah.
So finding the time, even if, and so people always will say they don't have the time, and everybody's got 2 minutes. you've got 2 minutes, make those 2 minutes count,
Yeah.
just as much as you possibly can. You'll be surprised at how much that will change things. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. The second thing is, with reframing around food is elimination diets are not forever, but my thing is for my clients is we need to know what they're absolutely allergic to, not sensitive to.
Mm-hmm.
Food sensitivity tests have too many false positives and lead to a lot of disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in the throes of an inflammatory response, everything's going to light up on that test because your system's just too sensitive. It
I
doesn't
agree.
matter. But true allergens need to be known. People need to know if they've got celiac disease. People need to know if they have an allergy to dairy. People, cow's milk. People need to know if they've got an allergy to corn. There's so much corn in everything.
Yeah.
And people need to know those things. So those are important because those are foods they're going to need to eliminate forever.
Right.
We don't eat allergens. We just don't do it. Can the allergens get better? If you don't eat it, you're not going to produce antibodies, so the blood test will come up negative.
Mm-hmm.
Eat it again and see what the blood test shows. So, that's not one of those things that generally we grow out of or anything like that. It's something we need to respect.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, for all of the stuff that everybody worries about for their food, the number one low-hanging thing that you can start to change is sugar.
Yes.
Everybody, should I eat gluten? Should I eat dairy? Should I eat this? Dairy is definitely an inflammatory food. But one of the things that while you're eliminating pieces of dairy out of your life, the biggest perpetrator for everybody is sugar, because that is going to drive the bacteria, and that's going to change your gut bacteria when you eat sugar. And your brain wants you to eat sugar because it wants to live in cortisol, because that's the sympathetic protective system, and it wants to be in charge. So it wants you to eat sugar, and it wants you to eat a lot of it. And then it gets the bugs that grow on the sugar. And now you have zero willpower because the bugs are driving the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the sugar bugs, and they want it. So the brain wants it, and the gut wants it. And this is where we get, the difference between hungry brain and hungry gut. And I know there's a whole bunch of discussion out there about drugs and different things and such. But changing the system over is the name of the game.
Right.
And you need to learn to live off of a different fuel source, and sugar should not be the fuel source. The fuel source should be protein.
Yes.
And with the right balance of lovely fruits and vegetables. For people who have painful bellies, you're going to need to probably do easier cooked vegetables, chewing them really well. Stay away from things that bother you. You're not going to be the people that can do flaxseed. You're going to be somebody who needs to do chia seeds that are much more soothing to your belly, but can still be helpful. Raw vegetables aren't going to work. You're going to need to just think nourishing. Think can I make these vegetables in a bone broth soup? I don't make my own bone broth soup, by the way. I buy it.
I make it. I have an Instapot. Instapot changed my bone broth life. It makes it so much easier, but I know there's good bone broth out there that you could buy.
But my point is, for people on the go, they're probably not going to do that in the Instant Pot. But all you have to do, then you can just, you can blend your vegetables right in and make a nourishing, easy half cup of something to drink.
Yeah.
That's going to be power packed with good things for your body, versus trying to eat something and drinking something that isn't going to feel good, but you got to get something in anyway.
Yeah.
So if you can think of anything about your diet and the foods that you eat, is nourish. That's the word.
I love it. And chew.
Yourself. Mm-hmm.
Chew your food.
Oh yeah. Well, the chewing isn't that. The chewing's non-negotiable.
Susan, before we wrap up, I feel like I could talk to you for another hour. Can we touch on fiber? I feel like fiber is because we're talking about the gut and constipation, and I feel like fiber is one of those confusing topics to a lot of people. Should I add fiber? Mm-hmm. How much fiber? What kinds of fiber? I feel worse when I eat fiber. I feel better. What's your approach to fiber?
So if you're one of these people with a lot of belly pain, you need to be eating and just working on adding very slowly into your diet some soluble fiber. So think about soluble fiber being the inside of the apple, not the
Okay.
outside of the apple is insoluble fiber. Think about which is easier to digest, right? So you want to look at like maybe oats, like in a small amount. Don't everybody starts off with fiber. I think the dietary recommendation is like 35 grams. My God, if you haven't, please don't do that.
I know. You have to start slowly.
Start very slowly. I would when people haven't been doing it or they're trying to add some in, I'll tell them a fourth a cup of oatmeal, maybe even an eighth of a cup. Just start with that, with something that that will go with it very easily for you. Egg whites work better, for some people. Like, just figure out what are the nourishing things you can do and stay away from the soluble fibers until you built up enough stay away from the insoluble fibers until you've built up enough good stuff with the soluble ones. So you also want to avoid things that are going to rapidly ferment in your body or going to draw a lot of water in real fast. And that's why for people with the belly pain, the foods that draw water in quickly make them very uncomfortable, which is fiber.
Right.
So we have to got to balance it, and you got to pick and choose, but here's the fibers not to go to. The fibers that are associated with all the sugar, which means the fibers that are in processed food are not good fibers for you.
Right. The fibers that grow from the ground.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
And fibers that you can cook. And, and for some people, they may, take an apple and peel it, and they may juice part of it and chop up the rest of it and, cook it and turn it into a bit of an applesauce. Yeah. And they can have some of the stuff from it, and it feels very good and it tastes good. And then you can put all kinds of cool things on it, like cinnamon and, things that maybe might make it taste a little bit better.
I think it's delicious on its own, but yeah, cinnamon is great. Yeah. Susan, it would not feel right for me to end this podcast without asking you about the voice and the breath. So you have magnificent and brilliant advice on how to use your voice to calm the nervous system. And I would love to end with this because I feel like so much of our GI issues and autoimmunity and digestive issues and even pelvic health issues are driven by stress. And it just leads to a cascade response of inflammation and autoimmunity and pain. So can you share with us what your favorite strategies for using the voice to calm the nervous system, which would help with your digestion, which would help with your gut health and your pelvic health? What are some of your favorite strategies?
So my favorite strategies is when you're doing some breathing exercises, about every third one for your exhale, hum. So you take that breath in, and then your exhale is you can feel the vibration in your chest and down in your belly when you do that. And then work on lowering the pitch to where it's going lower. Really helps bring us down, because we can come down part way, but we don't ever bring ourselves down the full way. Yeah. So the humming is a really beautiful thing that you can do to settle for people with urgency frequency. Even, we do all those little mind tricks like count backwards and things like that to kind of trick that our bladder isn't in control. But a lower hum can also help there.
Yeah, I do that with my clients all the time in the clinic when I teach them about the voice under your mentorship. And I say, okay, let's hum in a really low voice and see what you feel in your pelvic floor. And then let's do a really high pitch. And they are always blown away by that direct correlation between your voice and the breath and the pelvic floor. Susan, you are brilliant. Thank you for everything you do. Can you leave us with a final takeaway, your pearl of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners to take away with?
Sure. Remember, the underlying thing for everything is the nervous system. So you have to work on nervous system regulation while you work on everything else. And for the GI system, chew your food and make it an experience.
You're the best, Susan. Thank you so much for joining me today. I absolutely am confident that this is going to be one of the most popular episodes. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, before I sign off, I know that everybody's going to want more of Susan because I always want more of Susan. We're going to have all her links in the show notes, but Susan, please briefly tell us where people can find you.
You can find me at on my website, which is Learn, Think, Innovate, LTI Physio. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at SClintonPT, and on Facebook and LinkedIn as Susan Coel Clinton.
We are going to have all of those in the show notes. Please find Susan. She's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Your Pelvic Health Podcast. Thank you, Susan. It is where we give you the lowdown on all pelvic health matters. If you like this episode, please don't forget to like and follow, and please leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you the information that you want to hear. And remember, healing requires a whole body approach, and you need to be your own best advocate.